This is Boomer Life on AM 650.
Good evening and welcome back to Boomer Life on AM 650 with Simone Grewal. Again, today we are talking about addiction. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction or dependency issues, in studio with us, helping us get more answers on this topic, Jason Spies, who's the Executive Director and Interventionist at LDR Holistic Wellness Center, and John Patterson, who is the Human Relations Director. So let's talk about some of the, somebody who's looking for that hope to have to deal with this kind of addiction. Maybe it's someone in your family. Maybe it's you that's struggling. What are some of the myths associated with addiction?
Thanks, Simone. Excuse me. And I think it's incredibly important that, we demystify what we think of as an addict. I came up, I'm a baby boomer, so I came up in that generation where there was still a great deal of moral implication to being an alcoholic or an addict, as though it was somehow either a failing of moral fiber or character or willpower, or that, our parents had done a lousy job. So let me state categorically, you haven't done anything wrong, and nothing that you have done nor that has been done to you has caused you to become an addict. Addiction is a medically recognized condition that impairs certain areas of the brain that makes it very difficult for people with this condition to make good choices around consumption. So again, this is a more complex conversation that can take place here, and if you come over to the center, that's obviously one of the areas that we spend a lot of time on. But there are so many myths around addiction, and I think if we can dispel those and normalize it and realize, there are incredibly smart, intelligent, creative, imaginative, resourceful, resilient human beings who suffer from this disease. Mm-hmm. To say that addiction is a moral character problem would be the equivalent of saying, being a diabetic is a question of a lack of willpower. You should be able to, get a grip on your blood sugars. It's simply not realistic.
And this is what somebody might say: alcoholics and addicts are selfish and inconsiderate. They could exercise more control if they really wanted to.
Absolutely. Now imagine how I, who may think I have a problem and may in fact be deeply concerned about it, because I actually am a pretty responsible person, and now how do I get that message, Simone? How do I reach out to somebody if I think in confiding in you, my friend, you're going to, even if you're not going to say it to my face, I know that kind of behind the scenes you're saying, yeah, you know that John, I always knew there was kind of a weak thing in him. And worse yet, what if I'm a woman?
Yeah.
I mean, what are the social risks to a woman, a mother, a grandmother, who wants to take responsibility for an increasingly destructive disease, but is terrified of the social stigma that she's going to experience if she simply raises her hand and says, I need help. I don't know what's going on here, but I can't do this alone. And so if we can demystify some of this stuff, and to that point, the stereotype of, the alcoholic is the person drinking out of the brown paper bag behind the garbage disposal. Airline pilots, judges, people of the clergy, actors, actresses, scientists, teachers, policemen, firemen, mothers, fathers, grandpas.
It can affect anyone.
It can.
And that's just it. It's not that you can be in a certain job, you can be a certain part in your life, you could have a happy family,
Absolutely.
Everything on the outside, people could say that person has an amazing life, but really deep down, again, it's something that's they're not understanding, or they're not able to deal with at that moment, that they're reaching for that bottle or for drugs.
Yeah, and I really wanted to speak to this, if you don't mind, for a second, and
Please.
that is that we offer a residential drug rehab program, alcohol and drug rehab program for men. Most people think that that's filled full of this transient type of population, and it's actually quite the opposite. In fact, and John can attest to this, that many of our clients are profoundly talented, very amazing people, and exactly what you just said, that many of them are very high level, very high functioning individuals that are able to be successful in a number of different areas. However, when it comes to drug addiction or alcoholism, the family or the support system sitting there scratching their head going, I don't understand this. This doesn't make sense. And, and that's one of the things I wanted to talk about here today around the mist, because many people think that it's down on Skid Row, that there's a geo kind of area where addicts and alcoholics hang out. Well, in fact, where they say most of the heavily, populated or dense areas is actually in affluent communities. People that have the resources, they have the car in the driveway, the white picket fence, the 2.2 family, yet they've got so many stresses or pressures in life that they're converting over to an exterior coping mechanism, which happens to be alcohol or drugs, and losing control.
Now, if you're just joining us, this is Boomer Life on AM 650. We're talking about addiction. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction or dependency issues, Jason Spies is with us in studio. He's the Executive Director, Interventionist at LDR Holistic Wellness Center, and John Patterson, who's the Human Relations Director. Again, the website is holisticdrugrehab.org. And talking a little bit about some of the stigmas, we talked about being a woman, a mother, a grandmother who is really afraid to come out and talk about it. What are some challenges that men face when actually realizing there's a problem, or having them kind of come out of their shell more and asking for this help, because that can be a hard thing to do?
Yeah, why don't you go ahead, John?
Well, again, to borrow from the baby boomer stereotypes, suck it up, be a man, what's your problem? All of these things boil down to an implication that my addiction is really a character failing. It's a failure of me to step up and be the man that I'm meant to be. And so I not only have the problems that are associated with my active addiction, but I also have the problems associated with trying to hide the consequences of my active addiction for the fear of the social stigma that I'll incur. And as a man, there is, I was raised in that generation of men were men, and so what is wrong with me? And this becomes another part of the problem, and this is where addiction becomes so diabolical, because as I become increasingly confused and increasingly desperate, it's only reasonable that I'm going to turn to the one source of temporary relief from this increasingly unmanageable life experience. And that's my drug of choice. In my case, it was alcohol. And so if I could have stayed in a permanently intoxicated condition, my life would have been great, because I could have lived in that fantasy world and never come up for air. Unfortunately, at some point I had to sober up, then live with the consequences of whatever chaos I created in my drinking, plus all of the unmanageability that I was attempting to avoid in the first place. And so now I have an even more compelling motivation to want to go back and escape this increasingly desperate situation.
Now, John, you mentioned it was early on with you, with your first taste of alcohol and getting addicted, but really this can happen at any age.
Yeah.
Absolutely, Simone.
Yeah, we're seeing, and again, this is where we have to be very careful to kind of put a box around this is what addiction or alcoholism looks like. In fact, the population that appears to be the most susceptible is the aging population, where they're moving into solutions in terms of their pain or chronic, concerns that are going on for them, and the prescription pad gets pulled out, and here you go, take this. I've gotten so many calls from people, my doctor prescribed this to me, so therefore I don't have an addiction, yet I can't get off this, and my lifestyle is completely hampered by being intoxicated all the time. So it's really interesting that, addiction can play a part at any time of life. We've seen people that have successfully drank for 10, 15, 20 years, and now they go into retirement. They got nothing to do with their time, and all of a sudden, what used to be recreational now is, quite a chronic behavior because they don't really have anything else to do.
Now, if somebody listening right now is going through this, has been dealing with addiction to alcohol, to drugs, and they're finding that they're not able to talk to their family, they're not able to, reach out themselves, what are kind of the steps they should take? What is step one to getting the help that they truly deserve?
Well, first and foremost, Simone, I would say step one is to realize that you're not a bad person trying to become good. You're a sick person trying to get well. Addiction is not a moral failing. It's a physiological condition. And there is help for that physiological condition as we begin to understand it at deeper and deeper levels. So that's point number one. So point number two is that there are an increasing number of people who recognize the disease nature of addiction, who have themselves wrestled with these same demons and doubts and fears. And in case after case after case, and there are literally thousands and hundreds of thousands and now millions worldwide, there has been a remarkable support. That's why we would recommend you give us a call. We're part of that support network. We're all in recovery. We understand the nature of recovery. This is mystifying when you're on the outside looking in, but once you're on the inside and you begin to understand the real nature of this condition, you will be so relieved to discover that there truly is a solution to what up to now has been utterly bewildering. Mm-hmm. So I would absolutely encourage, give us a call. We'd love to talk to anybody who's got a question.
You're not alone, and there's hope. You're listening to Boomer Life on AM 650. We're talking about addiction. If you or someone you know is struggling with addiction or dependency issues, Jason Spees in studio with us along with John Patterson. The website is holisticdrugrehab.org. And when we come back, we're really going to talk about the culture of recovery. Stay with us right here on Boomer Life, AM 650.
Canada's only weekly radio show dedicated to the baby boomer lifestyle. This is Boomer Life on AM 650.